Welcome to the Terrible Podcast with your hosts from SteelersDepot.com, where you can find all your latest and greatest Steelers news. It's Dave Bryan and Alex Kozora, always lit, talking Steelers. And now, here's Dave and Alex.
Welcome to the Terrible Podcast, Season 16, Episode 96. He's Dave Bryan. I'm Alex Kozora, SteelersDepot.com. Thanks for being back with us this Friday, Steelers Nation. Dave, I know it's Spaghetti Day over there in the Dave Bryan household, so it's a pretty good day overall. Relatively slow on the news cycle for Pittsburgh, but Dave, how you doing?
All right, happy Friday. I think we got first Pirates spring training game, Saturday, I think?
I think so.
I might tune that in and got the hockey winding down, and congrats to the USA women. What a game that was to watch.
What a goal.
Against Canada there, and to pull the goalie when they did, and then get that goal. And then I tell you, I'm not a fan of 3-on-3. I don't mind 3-on-3 hockey in the NHL in that overtime period. But man, I can do without it. I think, man, you're playing for a gold medal and you playing 3-on-3 hockey. I mean, I guess I get it, but doesn't mean I have to like it. But thankfully, the women won that, and I guess Canada for the men playing today. I don't think Sidney Crosby is playing in that, and so we'll have to see what happens after that. Hopefully, that injury is not serious. But this is not Hockey Depot, so
Dave, live from Italy, providing Olympics coverage.
I try to get into some of these other sports as well too. I try to get into curling, and it's just too slow of a moving game, I guess, and I can't get into that. Some of the the ski jumping, I'll watch, but it's pretty much been hockey or nothing for me.
I hear you on that. All right, Dave, let's get into some Steelers news and nothing. Well, let's just get to the top story here. The biggest piece of news that's come out since Wednesday shows some sad news to pass along. Mike Wagner, the longtime Pittsburgh Steelers safety, four-time Super Bowl champion, passed away at the age of 76. This happened a couple days ago. Art Rooney II announcing the news, releasing a statement, and many tributes have poured in from those who covered him, and I think some teammates have made some comments as well. And so Wagner, one of those underrated pieces of that steel curtain defense of that Pittsburgh dynasty of the 70s, may not be revered the way that Mel Blount and Donnie Shell, Hall of Famers they are. Wagner, a really good, steady, consistent, all-around safety. Also, those who knew him said he was an incredibly kind and generous person as well. So sad news there about Mike Wagner, Dave.
Yeah, 76 years old, man. That's young, especially in today's. Do we know what? Did he have cancer or anything? I don't know if I've heard exactly what the cause of death was.
In 2021, Wagner revealed he was battling pancreatic cancer. I don't know if that was related to his death this week, but obviously that could very well tie in.
Yeah, boy, when you talk about a guy my age, and obviously the Steelers dynasty and 4 Super Bowls as a young kid and all, Mike Wagner's not the first name that pops into your head when you talk about several of those teams, especially on the defensive side of football. But man, as a card collector and a Steelers fan in the South, I mean, you definitely knew who Mike Wagner was, even though you didn't have the coverage and all down south that you obviously did in Pittsburgh and all. But yeah, underrated, I think is the best term to describe Mike Wagner as a player. And yeah, just sad, especially once again at passing away at 76, and yeah, just a sad time, and didn't know we would be writing that up this week. So thoughts and condolences go out to his family and friends for sure.
Agreed. Well said. The pride of Western Illinois, one of the best players to ever come out of the school. So he will be missed. Again, Mike Wagner dead at 76. All right, Dave, to transition to some other Steelers news about Aaron Rodgers, and that saga continues and still waiting on an answer, and the expectation largely from pundits and analysts and I think fans as well has been that Rodgers will ultimately return to Pittsburgh. When that decision will happen seems unclear, but in a differing take, a dissenting opinion, so to speak, Aditi Kinkhabwala was on 93.7 The Fan earlier this week and said that she had heard there was a minuscule chance that Rodgers would return. Now, I think those comments were partially couched in Rodgers' feeling right after the season ended, but she did not make any comment that those thoughts or feelings had changed, and those that talked to her still believe that Rodgers is more likely to retire than come back to the NFL for the 2026 season. So that's a competing thought, and Jerry Dulac said better chance than not that Rodgers returns, and so nobody knows, obviously, except for Aaron Rodgers, that he may still be deciding his future. But to offer the other point of view, Aditi saying minuscule chance Rodgers comes back.
Yeah, this is all has to be. I mean, that very well might end up being the case with him, but we know how close to the vest and how small of a circle that Aaron Rodgers has, and I'd find it really surprising if somebody out of that camp has let it slip out already that he's hedging one way or the other. And yeah, I know you can go back to that Pat McAfee show interview, a year ago or roughly a year ago, and him saying that he's almost, certain that 2025 would be his final year. But the further you got away from that and into the season, it seemed the more that Aaron Rodgers, came off that as well. So, I to me, all this is just speculation more than anything. I don't think anybody really knows what his thoughts are and at this point. Now, look, we are in the latter stages of February here. We are less than a month away from the start of the new league year. You would think that the Steelers would like, even though probably not official and signed on the dotted line, the Steelers would kind of like to know which way Aaron Rodgers is leaning, if not a full decision on whether or not he's coming back by the start of the new league year, and most definitely by the time the draft rolls around. Because look, if Aaron Rodgers isn't going to be your quarterback in 2026, you would probably like to know that by the start of free agency. Because look, there's going to be the talk about what's going to happen with Kirk Cousins, what's going to happen with Geno Smith. I think there's talk about, he could be a designated a post June 1st cap hit. Obviously the whole, what there is to potentially go after maybe in free agency. Obviously Malik Willis is going to be the talk, and I think there's some early numbers speculating running around of what he potentially could get in free agency, and then kind of the trickle down from there. Mac Jones is another guy that I think a lot of people are going to potentially talk about up and through the first couple of weeks, maybe of free agency as well too. So one would think, and I use that cautiously because I've tried to think before and got myself in trouble, but one would think that a decision from Aaron Rodgers will be made by the middle of March, if not a week or two later.
That's the hope, that's the goal, but we shall see. The one thing that made Aditi's comment, I think, more credible was, and I keep going back to this, right after that Texans game, or really during it in the final minutes where it was clear Houston was going to win, Pittsburgh's season would end, the couple final minutes kind of talked about Rodgers and his future, and Lisa Salters, the sideline reporter for that game, revealed a conversation that she had with Rodgers during Week 15 when the ESPN Monday Night Crew came to Pittsburgh for the Miami game in which Pittsburgh won. And her comment, I'm just going to read the quote verbatim. She says, quote, "We asked him," referring to Rodgers, "a few weeks ago when we were here Week 15, we asked him, is this it? He said, probably. That's what he's been saying all year. He said the team has been great. He doesn't know what the Steelers' plans are for the future, but he said for him, it feels like this is the end." And she offered that sentiment in a couple different ways throughout the rest of her report. So I know that Mike McCarthy obviously cracked open that door, but if Rodgers was thinking he wasn't going to come back under the belief that Mike Tomlin was going to still be his head coach, a coach that he respects and seems to really revere and came to Pittsburgh for in the first place, why would that be different just because Mike McCarthy is the head coach? So Could Rodgers' thoughts and feelings change? Of course, and his body felt good and he seemed to have fun, and those were important factors for him to even have a chance to return in 2026. But whenever the season ended, right after it ended, literally, it sounded like Rodgers was done, and you wonder what has changed. Again, McCarthy the hire, but if he wasn't going to come back for Tomlin, then the coach might not matter.
Well, but if there's anybody that he would come back for post Tomlin, it would probably be Mike McCarthy, and we established that kind of right out of the chute there. The good thing is you have to know Mike McCarthy has the bat phone line, right? He already talked about he's had conversations with Aaron, so I imagine he's not pushing him, but probably checking in with him here and there. Interesting note, I don't think it's going to take place by the time we finish up this podcast today, but I think Mike McCarthy is scheduled to talk with a Green Bay radio station later today. So I would imagine he will be asked about what's the latest on Aaron Rodgers. I don't know that we're going to get a definitive answer, but you can't get answers to questions that you don't ask, right? So I don't know. Maybe we'll learn a little bit more today. Maybe that other will be is I continue to be in contact with Aaron. That might be the biggest thing to come out of the topic of Aaron Rodgers with Mike McCarthy on the radio today. But we'll see about that. But what is the for lack of better things to talk about on today's show, what is the best path for this team at the quarterback position should Aaron Rodgers decide to retire or not play for the Steelers this offseason?
And we've had the conversation before. I would look at Mac Jones. I know the asking price for him could be pretty high and maybe too high to justify it. I think you look at Malik Willis, I'd certainly be in that mix, but Pittsburgh will be one of many teams in the hunt for Willis's services. And you look at the draft, you look at Ty Simpson. Is he a franchise guy? Do you view him in that lens? Maybe you do, maybe you don't. How do you feel about a mid-round guy, third-round pick, Garrett Nussmeier? And then, of course, you have Will Howard and Mason Rudolph. So I kind of have that checklist of, Willis, Jones, Simpson, third-round quarterback, and then, internal options as well is kind of the way I approach it.
Would you give up a second-round pick for Mac Jones?
No, I've said my max is basically a third, and that may not be enough to get it done. The posturing reporting from 49ers land is implying that it wouldn't be enough to get it done, but that's what I would offer for Mac Jones.
Yeah, and it's easy to look at this in the Steelers lens of, oh yeah, just give them a third-round pick and that'll probably be the best that they get. But you got to look at it from the 49ers lens as well too. Why would they want to move away from such a cheap option? Especially, they're probably thinking that they're going to be able to compete during the 2026 season, and Mac Jones proved to be a fit in that offense and a good spot starter. Should when Brock Purdy went down, so it would, and based on the contract and all, and based on the fact that okay, if we kept him another year, and then he did have to play, and he did play a significant amount, he obviously would produce a potential future high compensatory volume. So you have to think about your own team first, and then the compensation of what would it cost for us to move away from such comfort at such an important position. And that's why I feel like unless it becomes a really, really meaty trade offer, that the 49ers aren't going to want to move away from him.
And then with Malik Willis, some of the projections, and they're just projections, but 2 years, $40 million sounds pretty much the same as what Justin Fields got with the Jets last offseason, which Pittsburgh was not willing to pay in terms of the guaranteed money on that second year of the deal he got with New York, and maybe for good reason, as Fields seems to be on the outs with Aaron Glenn and the Jets. So could Willis command similar? It seems plausible given the lack of options and talent quarterback class draft and for agency, given his good play and granted limited action with the Packers. If I'm Pittsburgh, I'm willing to pay that because to me, if it's 2 years, $30 million, 2 years, $40 million, it's all kind of the same. It's not such a giant contract, Kirk Cousins, Falcons like that becomes an albatross if it doesn't work out. You can still get out of that deal in all likelihood without too much damage, and so it's still worth that chance.
Yeah, but you gotta think much like Justin Fields. I mean, he's probably a more valued guy than Justin Fields was a year ago. And how much guaranteed money past year one is he going to want? And what's the competition field going to look like? There are going to be more than one, just two teams looking into what's happening with Malik Willis in free agency.
Sure. I don't think anyone denies that. Miami's obviously a really good place to start with, maybe the favorite to land him given the GM connections, John Eric Sullivan, head coach Jeff Hafley, and a team clearly moving on from Tua at some point sooner or later. So, yeah, Pittsburgh would not be alone, but in terms of just the checklist, am I going to pursue it? I would.
All right. Let's assume that Aaron Rodgers doesn't come back and you don't get Malik Willis and you can't trade for for Mac Jones at that point. Do you have any interest in Geno Smith?
No, I mean, I've not been in on Tua and Kyler Murray, but you could at least spin the idea of if you hit and you got something to build towards. If you miss, then it's 1 year. You haven't hurt your franchise long term. So at least there's an idea of trying to build. I want Pittsburgh to be able to try to build something from 2026 and beyond. And there's a variety of names that could fit that, including Will Howard. I'm sure people are already sending emails about that to remind us of that fact. So I'm just looking for somebody I feel like there's something to build upon because I'm tired of the 1 year kind of roulette stuff at
All
quarterback.
right.
And even though Rodgers would come back, it's a bridge to nowhere longer term. So there's at least that appeal with Murray and Tua, although obviously those are not the most attractive names given their 2025 struggles.
All right. Let's roll it back to the what started the topic then. How much do you buy into that either Aditi or Jerry Dulac have a strong feel about when it comes to their reports?
Yeah, I don't think anyone really knows, and so I take these things with grains of salt, and I would recommend that listeners and readers do the same. We just put the information out there, and we'll see who is ultimately right or wrong whenever a decision gets made. But again, I do think about that ESPN report during that Texans game quite a bit because that was clearly the sentiment as the season was wrapping up. I know Rodgers said post game he was still going to consider his future, was not committing to anything, and of course, you can change your mind at a moment's notice. And obviously, the McCarthy hire makes that more attractive. Pittsburgh had hired Chris Shula or Anthony Weaver. There's no way Rodgers is going to come back and kind of learn a whole new system all over again. So it certainly increased the odds after Tomlin stepped down for this team to go to McCarthy. But I've always maintained it's certainly no slam dunk he does return.
All right. My overarching thoughts in this is, Lord, please don't let this run into past the draft.
I mean, really, the free agency, the draft doesn't matter. Again, I've said the draft doesn't matter. If you love Ty Simpson, you take him whether or not Rodgers is on your roster, whether or not he's playing or not. It's really about free agency because that's when you need to know from an organization standpoint about, okay, if Rodgers is not coming back, we need to make other moves and consider other options. And you don't want to be kind of held up by Rodgers' decision for all of that.
Right. Right. I mean, but obviously, free agency comes before the draft too. So.
Right, and so that's why ideally you'd like to know by then at least a verbal answer, even if there's no contract officially signed. So we'll see. I'm sure Rodgers is aware of that and wants to treat the organization with some respect as well. And again, the clock starts a whole lot earlier this year than last year. This time a year ago, there was no clock on Pittsburgh and Rodgers. He was still technically a Jet and still kind of weighing out options. And now obviously he's had since, more than a month already, 5 weeks or so to start contemplating his future.
Okay. Let me kind of rephrase. I just don't want to have to spend 20 minutes on a podcast once a week through the month of April wondering about the status of Aaron Rodgers
Sure.
and will he or won't he. And I think people listening kind of feel the same way. And if you were to take a poll of our listeners, do you think most of them are hoping Rodgers doesn't come back?
There's a larger population of fans this year that would be more open to Rodgers than a year ago, given how well he played, the good teammate he was. But I think most of the fan base, or maybe some sort of plurality of the fan base, if there were more than two options, would rather him move on and this team go in the Will Howard direction.
All right. Enough of Aaron Rodgers now.
Yeah, let's switch gears here. Our Troy Montgomery had an interesting article for Steelers Depot yesterday about don't discount the idea in Troy making the case for drafting another offensive lineman in the first round. Pittsburgh has done that frequently under Omar Khan, Broderick Jones, and Troy Fautanu. Names to come to mind, a lot of heavy O-line investments. Zach Frazier, not a first-round pick, but a second-round pick. Mason McCormick, you guys get the idea. With a hole at left guard and still some questions at left tackle, is that a crazy idea to say go back to the O-line well?
Well, I'll tell you what, as the day, day by day, I learn more and more about this draft class, and I'm still trying to get my arms around even, the first rounders and then into the potential second rounders. Uh and I think even our own Troy Montgomery mentioned Vega. How do you pronounce his last name? Ione?
Yeah, I'm not great on the pronunciation. That sounds about right.
Out of Penn State, and I went down a couple of rabbit holes in the last 24 hours with him, looking at some of the clips and all, and some of the tape on him. Uh, and we circle back to kind of the conversation. Oh, Bob, let's start here. Is this the
Mhm.
best? Is Ione the best interior offensive lineman from what we might know at this point in time in the pre-draft process? Once again, being latter portion of February, does it feel like he is potentially the top interior offensive lineman in this class? And I'll go first. From what I've seen so far, yes. Now, he is an underclassman, but he did play quite a few snaps at Penn State throughout his career. A little bit undersized, I think, as height. He's probably going to come in a little under 6'4", a little bit of a more stouter, heavier guy. I think along the lines of 330. It'd be interesting to see if he cuts a little bit of weight and gets in that maybe mid 320 range at the combine. Don't have an arm length on him. I did think Daniel Jeremiah during his conference call with the media yesterday ahead of the combine, was asked a little bit about arm length, and he said some teams are just kind of married to it, but he did give a good point, and as we get into scouting players throughout this offseason, for a lot of these guys that you might not know measurements on, go watch the tape first, and then if you have questions about, does the lack of does the arm length seem to matter on the tape initially, and then if it doesn't, does it matter if he comes in
Mhm.
with uh, T-Rex arms? I thought that was a good point that Daniel drove home. Looking at the tape on him and a cross section of how he was used, and specifically at left guard, I like it. I think this guy's a hell of a damn mauler. I thought another interesting point when looking at Ione's tape was the fact that, man, they moved him all around. You see him uh, uh, go outside and motion in on some of this split zone stuff and come across the formation and just absolutely knock the bejesus out of some people.
Yeah, little Spencer Anderson use, but even a little
Yeah,
extra couple layers. Trent Williams kind of like standing up in a 2-point stance, which is
yeah,
fun.
put him in the backfield a couple of times. Not that I'm advocating doing that a lot, but it just gives you an idea. Look, you got to be smart enough in some of these formations to not be the guy. You just go over there and man left guard. But the way and I'm talking more than just a few times, they used him outside of the left guard position and moved him around. So you got to be a pretty smart player overall to absorb and do all that. I think he's great out in space. I think he's a better run blocker than he is a pass protector, but he's got such a wide. I like the way he used his base. I think it was a conditioning coach or something too. They talked about just trying to expand on some of his mobility, and also to be interesting to see some of these drills he does at the combine and some of the timed events and all like that. All this is to say that if and I think if you look at the top 20 teams selecting in the draft and the likelihood that he'll potentially fall out of the top 10, and then the potential of him even falling out of the top maybe 20 here, I think there's a chance of that potentially happening. Obviously, all it takes is one team to pick them, and then that's all off the board. But I think there's a decent chance that Vega might be on the board at 21, and that could be a potential axis of the best player available versus need meeting perfectly for the Steelers, and especially if you don't re-sign Isaac Seumalo, you're going to have a opening there at left guard. I think Vega is considered a plug-and-play guy out of the chute. He's definitely younger. Just seems a great character guy as well too. So if we're boiling this down, is it crazy to think that the Steelers might go offensive lineman in the first round? I think the short answer to that question is no. And if Vega is still on the board, assuming he has, things check out at the combine, and I imagine he's going to have a pretty good combine here. It will be interesting to look at his arm length and all. But yeah, I after watching that tape, I'm in the Vega fan club. I think that would potentially be a good pick, and especially if some of those top wide receivers are off the board at the time.
You gotta keep an open mind, especially this time of year, and don't close anything off, especially when there very well could be a need or an opening should, say, Malu hit free agency like you and I expect. To address a couple of your points with arm length, it can still matter for interior guys, but it matters a lot less than it would for an offensive tackle. There are less space, less edges to worry about. You see Will Campbell struggle, not just because of a lack of arm length. There's a technique to it as well, and I think it was a health issue with Campbell, but matters less if he's got 32.5-inch arms that are the maybe ideal 33 plus. We saw this over a decade ago when David DeCastro fell because that perceived lesser value of a guard compared to an offensive tackle, and it fell into Pittsburgh's laps and worked out handsomely. So you keep it open. He's kind of built like, say, Malu, like you said, that stouter, squarer anchor to himself. And so, say, Malu's under 6'4" too and had a good career. So, yeah, is he going to be the pick? It's one of many names to talk about, and obviously most attention will turn to receivers and potentially still a quarterback like Ty Simpson. But I think you want to keep an open mind. I think you and Troy make good cases for it.
We also had a brief conversation the other day about blue chippers and all in this draft class, and I think our own Ross McCorkle tried to ask Daniel Jeremiah a question along those lines. I don't know if he got kind of the direct answer that he wanted to get, but I think when you look at potential blue chippers or guys that you would peg as, okay, well, this guy is a first rounder. Now, positionally, once again, when you talk about interior linemen, they tend to slip down a little bit as opposed to, let's say, blue chip tackles. But it at least what I've seen so far, when it comes to interior offensive linemen in this class, it feels like Vega is a blue chip player. And why would you not want to come out of the first round of this draft with a blue chip type player, especially once again if a couple of these wide receivers, because he even mentioned the wide receiver. What's the kid's name out of Washington? Boston.
Denzel Boston.
Yeah, he thinks he's going to be gone early. I think Mekhi Lemon, he think is potentially off the board at 21 too. And even though this is probably a good wide receiver class as far as flavors and all, where do you draw the line at about 21 as far as those guys coming off, as far as where the next tier of guys starts and all like that. So I think there's a good chance that Vega ends up being a 10-year starter in the NFL, and it just so happens to coincide. He predominantly played left guard at Penn State, and that potentially could be one of the larger holes that the Steelers have coming out of the free agency process this year, especially if they let Seumalo walk. So, yeah, in the last 24 hours, I learned a lot about Vega, and I have an open mind that, yeah, I could see the Steelers going that way, and specifically if that's the player that falls to them at 21.
Pittsburgh's plan of reinvesting in the offensive line has been smart and largely paid off, and so there's no reason to stop that if there's an opportunity and a need, and I think that fits. I think the pronunciation for his last name is Ioane, we'll go with. So the Vega Ioane. Is he the best?
Don't ask me to pronounce his full. We're just going to call him
Vega.
Vega moving forward, because that's much easier for a guy like me to say. Yeah, a good prospect. We'll dig. Obviously, we've got a profile up on him on the site, right?
Yeah, or Tom Mead wrote that, and he had a pretty glowing report. His final grade was at 8.9, so just missed that 9.0, which is the all-pro category for us. And that's not to get too into the semantics of it all and be too pedantic, but that's where I kind of had my blue chip. So I don't know if you're a first-round pick that automatically makes you a blue chip guy. To me, that's
Right.
like a 9.0 in our grading scale, all-pro plus type of guy, and he seems to be right on that border.
Okay. All right. I
Now,
like him.
is he the best guard? Probably the best pure guard. There'll be some questions. Would Caden Proctor move inside, a big body, but a little kind of messy with his technique? Some people like Francisco Maui Noah from Miami, Florida, to move inside. I like him as a tackle. I think he can certainly play offensive tackle, but I think there's some consideration to him going to guard. So could that, impact how the guard boards get ranked, quote unquote? But certainly, and he also went viral. Vega did about that.
Pushing a cart.
Yeah, what was that after the loss to I think Ohio State? I forget which game exactly it was. He jumped over the wall there and helped push one of the equipment carts, and so just a selfless moment caught on camera that kind of speaks to his character, which obviously teams will appreciate.
I didn't. I saw that he has some limited center experience too. In other
Does
words,
he?
a kind of an emergency guy, I think.
They do that in practice, or was there a game where you had to step in? I can try to check
I
PFF's
read
charting on that.
something on that. I didn't go too deep.
I mean, sometimes early in their career, like Maui Noah played some center in practice at Miami his freshman year just because he was kind of, trying to find his home. Looks like 17 snaps in 2025 or 2024, excuse me, for Vega. So maybe some game day experience there. Played mostly left guard last year.
Let me see here. Last year, you're showing last year some very limited center.
2024, he had
Oh,
17
okay.
snaps according to PFF.
All right, none last year. Let me go through PFF here real quick.
But he's played everything. He's played every position, it looks like. He's primarily left guard, like you said, but he has dabbled at every other position along the
Okay.
offensive line.
Yeah, even in 2024 played at right guard for 135 snaps, so you get some versatility in there as well too. But I mean, if you drafted this guy and drafted him 21 overall, that's going to be your plug and play left guard
Sure.
as well too. So yeah, I think we agree that should we should not just rule it out about the possibility of that. In fact, that we'll see what happens with Omar Cooper move. It did get me thinking too about the whole Omar Cooper thing, and especially based off of what some of the things that Daniel Jeremiah said yesterday. It feels like by the time we get to draft day, the consensus will be that Omar Cooper is just probably outside of a round one guy. Now we'll obviously see what he runs and all like that. And I think even your speculation is he's not going to be a 4.44 guy, uh, and if he's a 4.5 guy, what does that do with his stock? But I was thinking, is that the type guy that would fall to the Steelers in the second round? And my initial reaction is no. But with these extra picks and all, that would be prime opportunity if he fell out of the first round with Omar Cooper to go up in the second round, and specifically maybe because Daniel Jeremiah started talking about it, and I started to cringe a little bit thinking about it, about how Omar Cooper would be a perfect fit with the Bengals to be kind of that Tyler Boyd player to go along with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins over there. And it did make a lot of sense, even though a lot of people expect the Bengals, I think, to go heavy defense, at least early in this draft. But if they did decide to go a compliment, a guy they can move around, a guy that can play in the slot quite a bit, in Omar Cooper, potentially they could have their eye on him in the second round. So could you I know it's ways out. We don't project a lot of trades and all like that, but at least with the draft capital that the Steelers do have, if they were in love with Omar Cooper in the second round, it would make a lot of sense for them to trade up, maybe ahead of Cincinnati in that second round. And could you imagine Vega in the first round and maybe Omar Cooper in the second round after a trade up?
Yeah, that would be attractive. I imagine it'll cost you one of those 3 third-round picks, plus obviously your second to move up,
Yeah.
I don't know, 15, 20 spots into that top end of the second round. I don't know if Cincinnati's gonna be his landing spot because, like you said, there's so many needs defensively, but the AFC North, it could be a home for Omar Cooper Jr. The Browns need receivers in a desperate way. The Ravens need somebody opposite. Zay Flowers likely is gonna hit free agency. Andrews is getting older, so they just need more weapons for the pass game in general, so could certainly see him go to the AFC North.
All right. Back to Vega real quick. It feels almost certain he'll fall out of the top 10, right?
That seems likely.
All right. 15.
I hadn't looked at what teams are gonna need guards and who's gonna fill holes and have holes created by what happens in free agency, so I'm not really at that point to sit there and say, what team he's gonna go to or not go to.
All right, I like his chances of falling out of the 15 from where I sit and have studied so far. So that leaves a gap of, let's see, 16, 17, 18, 19, 5 picks for him to fall to the Steelers at 21. In other words, that's somebody I think that needs consideration there.
Sure. It's a good suggestion and somebody to talk about in this sea of receivers. What else from Daniel Jeremiah? Those were kind of the notable comments. He talked about, Omar Khan, some options he might have with these dozen picks Pittsburgh's likely and projected to have. You could trade one of them for a veteran type player. You could try to trade one of those picks for 2027 capital. So some different strategies. It'll be very interesting to see how Omar Khan navigates how he uses that capital.
Yeah, and I think, and it felt kind of obvious before this, but in so many words, he doesn't view the Steelers as a team potentially to trade up from 21 in the first round.
I mean, there's no special reason to think Pittsburgh would do it more so than another team. But when you have 12 draft picks, it gives you the flexibility to kind of do what you want. So if there was somebody that they loved, if they loved Carnell Tate, if they loved Denzel Boston, just throwing some names out there, there's nothing preventing Pittsburgh from doing that. If you
Right.
had only 6 picks, it's a lot harder to do. And you probably do not want to trade 27 capital, knowing that you're going to need that for next year in the potential quarterback class. But when you have a dozen, it gives you the ammunition and flexibility.
Mm-hmm. All right, so we'll obviously continue to have potential conversations about maybe that happening. I'm sure we'll get some hypotheticals throughout the emails throughout the draft season as well too. The other thing that kind of stuck out to me about Ty Simpson and Daniel Jeremiah's thoughts on him. Obviously, he thinks Francisco Mendoza is the top quarterback in this draft. It feels, based on things that has said and written, that he would have Ty Simpson as the second quarterback in this draft at this point now. But there is it feels like he's not. It feels like he has Simpson falling out of the first round, but he's also careful to say that you never know how quarterback need and lack of quality class at the quarterback position how could play into things. So he sort of, I think, has Simpson as like his 34th or 30, I forget what he said, ranked player overall. He talked about some of the things that are already out there when it comes to Ty Simpson. Had a pretty good start to the season, then kind of tailed off from there. I'm continuing to learn and chart a lot of the things from Ty Simpson's season last year. I mean, you look at the game against Wisconsin. That guy could not miss in that game in Wisconsin. It was like 24, 29 or 25, 20. I forget what the exact stats were on that. But there is I'm going through specifically now through all these games and looking at the deep balls of everything over 16 or 16 or more yards down the field. And he was wildly inconsistent on that. I don't think he was great with the deep ball. And then I saw some stats this morning from college football numbers, and a stat that you're going to probably start seeing and reading more and more about is completion percentage over expected. That's not a new stat in and of itself, but a lot of people now are starting to hone in on completion percentage over expected by pass depth. All right. And Ty Simpson, once you get past the, I don't know, right around the 20-yard range, specifically, there's not a huge variance there, but when you get to balls more than 20 yards down the field, it looks like, at least some of the charting that they have here in rankings, he drops off considerably. I think one of the biggest takeaways from this chart, and once again, you get that at CFB Numbers on Twitter, and I think that was released this morning. So it should be easy to find. You look at some of the variances in there, and a guy that we've kind of talked about, Cole Payton out of North Dakota State, a guy that I know we'll learn more about at the combine, and I'm sure we'll have more discussions there. His numbers, completion percentage over expected, look good, especially the further he goes down the field. And Drew Aller, once you get past I think it's a 30-yard distance down the field, just skyrockets up as far as CPOE goes. So I those are just one one set of stats there to look at when it comes to quarterback and all. But what I am finding with Ty Simpson too, man, he's got a very discernible pat of the football. That's concerning in his windup and delivery and all. And the other thing is his time to throw was when you look at top rated quarterback or quarterbacks expected, or let's just say quarterbacks going to the combine this year, he had one of the longer time to throw stats in college football last year. So they're a little bit concerned over that, the padding of the football. There's a lot of great layering of throws on his tape, and a lot of really good throws on his tape too. But just it felt like, depending on the game that you watch, kind of wildly inconsistent the further he got past 16 yards down the field. And he's another one that I think his average depth of completion was well under 7 last year as well too. So still learning more about him, and obviously he was a 1-year starter, and I think that's one of the things that Daniel Jeremiah pointed out as well too, is you only have 1 year of tape really with this kid at Alabama, and there was quite a bit of variance when it comes to his play overall. And but all that said, he still seems to be the second best quarterback in this draft. Is just, where does he go at this point?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the question is less about, is he the second best quarterback, but how good is he as the second best quarterback? Is he a first round grade? Is he a future franchise guy? Do you feel comfortable staking your claim into him for the next 2-3 years at least, and believing that he is the guy? And that's really all the question comes down to, whether you're the second rated quarterback or the fourth rated quarterback. We've seen some classes where the fourth rated quarterback is still that first round type of a guy. I mean, we've seen classes where the second rated quarterback is not worth taking. And it sounds like there's certainly some valid warning flags and sirens on Ty Simpson that will have to be explored more in depth.
And to me, he's definitely not a first-year starter in the NFL type player. So he would take some grooming and all for sure.
Yeah, seems like it. By the way, McCarthy, speaking on that Packers radio show, or Green Bay radio show, I should say, I don't know if there's anything earth-shattering coming out of that. He, I think, did say he's preparing for both scenarios, a Rodgers return and Rodgers not returning. So nothing groundbreaking there, but McCarthy offering commentary on being ready for either decision.
All right, we'll have the full breakdown of that. All that he says that's worth saying, recapped on the site today.
And I don't think he 100% confirmed it, but seemed to hint that this team will continue to work at training camp at St. Vincent College in Latrobe, which is great news. Expected, but great news all the same.
All right.
All right, Dave, where to from here? Let's stick with the McCarthy and NFL draft and kind of combine both ideas we've been talking about. Jeremy Pike had a really good study on the draft history of Mike McCarthy and receivers. We fully expect Pittsburgh to draft at least one and probably double up on receivers in this year's draft. So what is the history? And Jeremy showed there's been 23 receivers drafted under Mike McCarthy, both during his time in Green Bay and Dallas. And I know that he is not solely responsible for all of these picks and probably had more power and sway in Green Bay than he did in Dallas. But just to put it all out there, you guys can check the article, top of the site, SteelersDepot.com. Thought one really interesting data point that he had, Jeremy did, of the 23 receivers taken, only 2 were under 6 feet tall. Greg Jennings in '06 and Randall Cobb in 2011. Now, those ended up being 2 pretty good picks by McCarthy in Green Bay, but none under 6 foot since 2011, just 2 out of 23 in general. So could that hurt an Omar Cooper if he comes in under 6 foot or any other smaller receivers?
I think it's something definitely to take into consideration, and but look, it goes back to the player and the tape too. So I wouldn't want to take somebody off my board just because he would. And what's Omar going to measure in at?
I think he's listed right at 6 foot or so. I'll check what Indiana has him. But I mean, he's not obviously, you're not drafting him because of his height or his overall build. Listed, I think, 6 foot 201, at least on ESPN site, 6 foot 204 on Indiana's page. So he's probably under 6 foot whenever he measures in.
All right. What does draft
Draft scout. I don't know if he's done a junior day weigh in, if we actually have one, or what the how trustworthy that is, although it generally is a pretty good site. I don't know if they have anything up on Cooper. I mean, he's going to probably, if he's listed 6 foot, he's probably 5'10.5" to 5'11.5", somewhere in that range.
All right. What are some of the other main takeaways from Jeremy's study there?
I mean, that was the big one. Similar that only 2 of those receivers were under 190 pounds. And so, again, that's kind of the same thing, drafting some size. Those were, who was the 200, 190? It was David Clowney and Trevor Davis. And so no household names there. In terms of the 40 time, nobody who runs super slow, but he didn't prioritize speed. Only 3 that of the 21 that tested, there were 2 that didn't. So exclude them. Only 3 of the 21 ran under 4.4, but only 2 ran slower than 4.6. So kind of just looking for good speed, doesn't need great speed at the position.
Looks like at least of the players that ran the 3 cone, 7.19 was the highest time, right? Malachi Dupree, is that right? Am I reading this right?
At the highest, I know the average is just under 7 seconds on that, but that's always tougher because fewer guys are doing those things, and you get into pro day, and how much do you trust the pro day time? And typically at pro days, teams are using their own times, and so what does the scout stopwatch say versus the quote unquote official time? Those are not always aligned. So kind of just looking at the baseline height and weight, just kind of size metric, because obviously teams can have some pretty good benchmarks on that, and McCarthy seems to at least want adequate size.
All right. That's not going to prevent us from still talking up Omar Cooper probably the rest of the draft cycle.
Yeah, still would make sense. And again, the 2 outliers of under 6 foot, Jennings and Cobb, kind of show that you can certainly find some good picks with guys who are not the tallest prospects.
All right. Good job by Jeremy there.
Yeah, really good job by Troy and Jeremy with their articles yesterday and today. Let's talk about Peyton Wilson. Flip over to the defensive side of the football. I wrote about him about a week ago. Wanted to kind of bring this up during a quiet time whenever we didn't have as much to talk about. Where are you at on Peyton Wilson? Year 3, didn't have that big breakout year I thought he would in year 2. Was removed from base 3-4 roles by Cole Holcomb and then Malik Harrison later in the season. Where are you at on Wilson's future?
Still wondering if he can be an every down player.
Yeah, me too. I mean, clearly Pittsburgh he's not earned the trust to stop the run, and getting removed from those base packages, which was very clear. He never got those back throughout the rest of the season. They went to Holcomb and then Malik Harrison whenever he came back from his knee injury. He's just been his 2 years in Pittsburgh, a nickel guy. And of course, you're a nickel the majority of the time, but when you're playing with big people, when you're playing Baltimore late in the year, playing Cleveland, you're not getting Wilson out there. And when you can't stop the run, it's hard to really have a high ceiling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think that's the big question the Steelers have to answer, and another reason to kind of wonder what's are they more than likely to carry Patrick Queen at least one more year? And we talked about how far can this team even though some guys because of cash earnings and cap cost versus production and play, how far down can you cut, especially specifically in the inside linebacker room? I mean, even if you re-sign Cole Holcomb, are you doing so for him to be an every down player? Probably not. Uh, you don't know really anything about Bruner except for you got a very good special teams player. Do you have enough confidence in him to potentially be an every down player? Probably not. Malik Harrison, is a guy that could potentially go out the door. I mean, how much you cut Patrick Queen at that point? What are you left with? So you would have to have a lot of trust that potentially Peyton Wilson could be that every down guy if you did cut that deep. And let's say you cut Harrison, you cut Patrick Queen, you didn't re-sign Cole Holcomb. Even if you address the off the ball line backer position, say round 2, round 3, round 4, can that guy? You're putting a lot of I guess confidence in rookie coming in and being able to take over that role, and I think that's a lot to ask at a mid round off the ball linebacker. So the big question is going to remain, and we'll get a better taste of this once again, or a better feel for this come the middle of March, assuming to see what happens with a guy like Patrick Queen and see what happens with a guy like Malik Harrison, and then get it moving past that. Do they spend a mid let's just say a day 2 pick on the position, and what does that mean for a guy like Patrick Wilson? But or Peyton Wilson. The overarching thought is, at least at this point, though, is do we think that Peyton Wilson could be an every down player? And from what we've seen so far, the answer is no. I think.
Right, and that's a big problem because even though it's a new coaching staff, you got to be able to stop the run, play in this AFC North football. Still facing Derrick Henry, still facing Quinshon Judkins next year, and the Bengals ran over you when you didn't respect the run game in that first matchup that lost to Cincinnati last season. So I'm not out on Peyton Wilson. The talent's still there, but there's work to do. And yes, it is a new coaching staff, new DC, but it's the same positional coach. And I still think keeping McCurley is a very questionable decision for the health and merit of this inside linebacker room. And so it's not like Wilson has a new coach that could maybe show him a different perspective. And it's not irony, but the twist might be that Wilson's issue in the NFL was not health, which was the big bugaboo about him. It's why he fell to the 3rd round. Teams had him off the board for medical reasons, not on field reasons. But in the NFL, he's been squeaky clean health, but his play might be the issue in terms of block deconstruction, playing downhill. The lack of arm length is also one of those underrated things with him. He's got 30.5-inch arms, super stubby on a tall 6'4" frame, not able to disengage and get off a block. Star Loston commented on that last year. So that could be the issue that really does him in more so than anything health related.
Agreed. Uh-huh.
So we'll see. We'll see. It's going to be a big 2026 for Peyton Wilson. All right, Dave, anything else coming across the wire, maybe last second, that we have not addressed?
What did Patrick Graham have to say?
He had an interview one-on-one with Missy Matthews that was published this morning. Nothing crazy. Talked about why he chose Pittsburgh. I assume he had some options, and working with Mike McCarthy in Green Bay in 2018, working with the Steelers franchise and their rich history of defenses. He likes to look at this defense, literally how big this defense is, but nothing crazy to talk about, carrying over the 3-4 and keeping language the same. And that's going to help the transition for everybody. So that's all good there.
All right. I imagine we don't want to get deep into what Zach Banner's saying. We've kind of have we moved past the whole he said, she said stuff overall, even though Zach Banner continues to make the rounds.
Yeah, I mean, there's just not much else to say. Banner was on 93.7 The Fan today and was asked about that. I know Banner had a video a couple of days ago kind of giving his thoughts and largely defending Ben and, saying he was a good guy. And I know that he helped Ben did whenever Banner tore his ACL in 2020. So, yeah, there's really not much any new ground still being talked about some, but I'm a 24-hour news cycle kind of a guy, so I was kind of out on this story one day after it concluded. So I've kind of had little interest to discuss it too much. But yeah, Banner giving his thoughts earlier today.
All right, let me recap going back to Ty Simpson and Daniel Jeremiah. Daniel Jeremiah said, I think he probably has the most at stake between where we are today and where we get to the draft. Someone who I think most teams will have as a second quarterback. It's not really so much is he number two. It's just how high a pick is he worthy of. And when you have a limited number of starts he has, teams are going to have to get comfortable with that. And then he goes on to say, with Ty, there's the first 6 or 7 games. He was excellent, making good decisions, accurate, layered throws, but he didn't play well coming down the stretch. So when you see that, you don't have another 3 or 4 years worth of good tape to forgive that and be comfortable with it. And he goes on to say, for me, he's in the 30s, 40s range as just a pure grade, but I wouldn't be stunned if he ended up going in the first round because there's enough teams in need at the position. So I think that's the overarching thoughts ahead of the combine on Ty Simpson. And obviously he's going to be a huge topic of discussion, not only, Steeler related, but as far as this quarterback class goes, next weekend when the combine gets underway in Indianapolis.
Yeah, and just to kind of an offshoot of your commentary about Vega and offensive line and different ideas and other positions that aren't just quarterback or wide receiver, I'll continue to talk about cornerback CBs out there. Pittsburgh does not re-sign James. I mean, if Pittsburgh re-signs James Pierre to that 2-year, $12 million deal we talked about, does that take first-round cornerback off the table entirely? I'm not sure that it does.
No, because I think you're hoping that you're in a situation where you're hoping that you can get even continued level of play out of James Pierre or a slight increase in play over James Pierre. But at James Pierre's age and history and all, I mean, it feels like you'd be doing good to get one more good season out of James Pierre on the as far as an outside corner. So you got to continually be looking ahead, and we'll see what happens with some of these free agents of who they bring back, like Samuel and some of these others. But you got to start reinvesting in that position for down the road. So I mean, if you gotten a situation where you were in love with a corner in the first 2 rounds of this draft, regardless of what happens with Pierre and Samuel and whoever else, then you better be looking hard at taking that player.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Now, how exactly would that first round corner get on the field? I'm a little shaky on. You want your first rounders to play basically ASAP, but there's still probably some sub package things you could do, some dime packages. Injuries obviously are always a factor, but I just say that to say there are some really good corners in this class. I talked about Avion Terrell in my mock draft from Tuesday's edition. You got the couple of Tennessee kids are really interesting. Jermod McCoy, who missed all of 2025 with a torn ACL, but still viewed as a first rounder, which kind of tells you how highly that guy's thought after. And a guy who helped replace him in Tennessee this year, I just did the report on him. It'll go up in a couple of days. Colton Hood, who transferred from Colorado, started for the Volunteers, and he's got a real good makeup, physically gifted, just raw and kind of has to learn the position a little bit more. So you got the LSU kid, you got a bunch of corners that I think are also worth considering and talking about.
You think most teams are going to view Terrell as a inside guy?
No, he's an outside guy. He's an outside just because he's a little bit small. Like he can still play on the outside. He's been an outside guy at Clemson. He looked less comfortable in the slot. To me, he's an outside guy all day.
All right. Okay.
All right. Anything else, Dave?
What do you think he's going to run? What do you get a sense on the tape? Yeah.
What does his brother run? His brother ran pretty fast. But his brother a little bit bigger too. What did AJ run whenever he came out of Clemson? 4.42. My comp for Terrell was another Clemson kid, kind of putting them all together. In fact, they were high school teammates. Nate Wiggins, kind of a thinner frame, but outside corners. Wiggins a little bit taller than Terrell. I think Terrell's going to run well. He was a track guy. He ran relay at high school, so he's going to be a low mid 4.4s guy.
All right. What did Jeremiah say about Terrell? Do you remember?
Was he even asked? I didn't go through the whole.
I thought he mentioned a few things about him. I've got the transcript here somewhere, but
If
maybe
you
we'll
can
talk a little bit
pull it
more
up.
about him on the Monday show.
Let me see if I can find it. Is it in our chat? Do we know exactly, was that hour 1, hour 2? Do we know
Well,
when
I
that?
think let me see if I've got
I think
the.
I just found the comment.
Okay.
I'm just reading the rough transcript here, so apologize if I stumble over my words. He says, quote, Avion Terrell is a playmaker. I mentioned him as somebody who plays inside. I think he can also play outside as well. He does both there in college, real high on the nickel board, but that's kind of the range where he goes. And then he's got a lot of juice. He might run in the 4.2s. Is that from
Mm.
Terrell? Okay, I mean, that might be somebody else. There's some comment about South Carolina, so I don't know if that was referencing Terrell or somebody else. So, yeah, I mean, could Terrell play inside? I mean, I think people look at the forced fumbles, the line of scrimmage production, the sacks, the tackles for loss. He's willing to tackle. Is he great size-wise? And he kind of falls off a little bit. So I liked him on the outside. He did play a lot more on the outside than he did in the slot. I think he played a little more there maybe 2 years ago at Clemson. It was more outside this past season, but I kind of viewed him as a natural cover guy on the outside. Plus, if
All
it's
right.
a nickel guy in the first round, there's value in that, but obviously an outside corner is going to give you more value.
All right. I need to get a little bit deeper into his tape before I talk more about him.
And that 4.2's comment might be on Kilgore. I think it's a safety from South Carolina, so check me on that. But again, I think Terrell's going to run well. He's going to run, I think, 4.4 something.
All right. Anything else breaking across the wire? Anything else from McCarthy we can hit on before we take some emails here?
No, I'm trying to think if I had anything else. This weekend, I got some articles on Johnny Smith and why his season might have been the worst ever by a tight end, at least in the modern era. And just to reaffirm the point, I mean, we all know that Johnny Smith's not coming back, but when it's that bad, I think it's worth mentioning how bad it was. That's not. Why did it go so wrong with Johnny Smith? It felt like he comes back with Arthur Smith, tight end heavy system, coming off a Pro Bowl year. It was surprising how bad it was. It shouldn't have been that bad.
Yeah, I think it was usage and not matching up to his skill set, the offense,
But what was
and
the mismatch? Because it's Arthur Smith. Who knows how to use
yeah,
Johnny Smith better than Arthur Smith? They've been
yeah,
together almost their entire career.
and it constantly looked like him and Aaron Rodgers were
Yeah.
on the same page, period. And then when he had a couple of easy drops in there, and it just kind of spiraled from there. Aaron seemed to lose trust in him as weeks went on. He just became he became a guy that was just out there running routes and not getting targets.
Yeah, I think the lack of chemistry with Rodgers is what the main issue was, and why that chemistry was so bad, I don't know. They were healthy, all training camp, they worked together. I mean, Smith missed a little bit of time in training camp, but nothing incredibly, lengthy. So the chemistry was just really bad. I've never seen two players have less chemistry than Aaron Rodgers and Johnny Smith.
Man, you talk about a guy that caught like 80 passes a year before for Miami?
Yeah, he was a Pro Bowler, 80 passes for 800 yards, 8 touchdowns, had a career year and wanted that's why he got traded in the first place. He had that big year. He wanted paid. Miami didn't want to pay him and they ended up dealing him as part of the Ramsey Minka deal.
All right, I have a feeling in a month from now he'll be a thing of the past when it comes to the Steelers.
Yeah. All right, Dave, let's get to some reader emails, excuse me, and
Listener emails.
close out. Reader, at least list. I don't know. I'm all over the place today. Let's get to some emails in general and close out today's show.
All right, let's start with Nathan Casey here. Cap imbalance. He says if the Steelers move on from Jonnu Smith, Jalen Ramsey, Malik Harrison, and Patrick Queen, they will save about $45 million against the cap next year. Those guys shouldn't be in the long-term plans. That can help free up money for JPJ, Pierre, Herbig, Benton, etc. Doesn't this make moving on from Watt more sensible and leave room for Herbig to get paid and play? Unless TJ is a defensive player of the year candidate, he isn't worth $42 million APY, and you have his young replacement in the roster. That move saves another $12 million against the cap. Along those lines, the Steelers are paying $95 million for offense next year and $161 for defense, according to over the cap. If they really pay those good young defenders, won't that imbalance just get bigger? Is that what McCarthy wants? There should be some excitement since with that much money and resources, the defense should be elite, and maybe new schemes and voices can make that happen. You're going to continue probably having people wondering about the value of TJ Watt, especially when you look at just cash earnings alone versus what they're getting on the field. But you got to also think about replacement quality if you were to move on. Look, you can make a lot of great arguments that this team should just move on from TJ. What is the most if such a thing were to happen? What mechanism are you going to use to get rid of TJ? Just a flat out post June 1st cut, or are you going to trade him? And I think we've already established that it's a pie in the sky to think that you're going to get a first round draft pick for TJ Watt. In fact, you probably would be lucky to get a second round pick for TJ Watt. If people are on this side saying that he's not worth that money, what are they saying on the other side of potential trade value and all that? Is it really worth for what TJ can give you on the defensive side of football for the $32 million or whatever cash he's going to earn this year, to go out and just either get peanuts for him in return just to save the $12 million and the $12 million in cap and $32 million in cash, versus what you're going to be left with. Can you really expect, if you gave Nick Herbig any kind of starter value deal this offseason extension, is Nick Herbig a good 1-for-1 replacement of what TJ Watt will give you in 2026?
I just sort of reject the premise that it's both and, that you have to cut all those guys to free up money for the guys that you might want to pay. You might cut one of those guys. You could certainly cut Jalen Ramsey, free up a ton of money alone right there. And with the other cap space Pittsburgh has, they're going to have money, these long-term extensions. They have lower first-year cap charges. So this is not an either or, where it's either cut all the veterans to free up money so you can re-sign the young guys, or don't. I think you can certainly do a mix of both, and probably will do a mix of both.
And then, we ran through the potential cuts and all, the whole Jonnu Smith, Jalen Ramsey, Malik Harris, and Patrick Queen. I mean, in reality, though, how likely are all four of those players going to be ex-Steelers a month from now?
Yeah, you're not cutting all those guys. You may get one or two of those names, but not all of them.
And then when you look ahead to extensions this offseason, or guys re-sign like Pierre, you're not going to break the bank for Pierre if you re-sign him. JPJ, that's going to be obviously one of the, it feels like a slam dunk to get done. And probably probably the most expensive extension this offseason. Is it a slam dunk that Herbig and Benton get done now?
No, it's not a slam dunk. We had that discussion. I think there's reason to wait on the other guys. That also includes Darnell Washington. They may get a deal done with Darnell, but even if they do, that's not going to be a big money contract in terms of relative to a Porter type of deal. Washington's going to be $8-9 million per year. That's a good contract and good for Washington for it, but it's not crazy money.
Nathan, I get the root of your email here. Let me ask a question back to you, Nathan. Do you, if they re-sign Herbig and jettison Watt, do you think you're going to get 1-for-1 replacement value from? And look, we both are huge Herbig fans, but is Herbig a guy that you can throw out there for 850 to 900 snaps in a season and expect not only as a pass rusher but against a run to get the same quality of play?
Yeah, I think the issue that I've had with Herbig, and he's a tremendous player. He's been great and highly efficient and super impactful. He's just been awesome. But, whenever he's had to play at a lot more snaps, not kind of been able to rotate and come in fresh the way that he has in the past. You've seen him struggle. He went through a pretty quiet stint last year as a fuller time guy when I think it was whenever Watt had the lung injury. So that's kind of the one question I still have with Herbig is, can he still be that similar impactful player over a lot of snaps rather than kind of benefiting from rotating and playing fresh?
All right, let's move on to Richard Jameson. Alex wrote a great article on what Mike McCarthy looks for in wide receivers. That was Jeremy Pike that wrote that. A lot of people think Alex wrote that, but
Yeah, it's all JP.
Alex could write that, but JP wrote that. Anyway, he says, but he did not address what that means for the current wide receiver room. So he asked us to speculate, what does that mean for the current wide receiver room? Well, A, there's not much beyond DK Metcalf really to talk about right now. I mean, I think we've all established that if Scotty Miller comes back, it's just going to be a minimal value contract and compete for a roster spot. Ben Skoranek is predominantly a special teams player. Roman Wilson, what you know, if there's any positive when it comes to Roman Wilson, it's a new regime, and he's still on his rookie contract, so he'll be given every opportunity, I would think, to compete for a roster spot there. But he is, based on the measurable side of things, definitely under the 6 foot category, right? And
Mhm.
but and obviously Calvin Austin III, his value outside of the organization might end up with him being in a different place anyway a month from now.
Yeah, I mean, you could obviously sit there and say the guys who don't meet the height requirements are going to be in danger, and that would make some sense. But it's a different calculation guy on a roster versus a draft pick where you can pick one of a half dozen names. So maybe means a little bit less. Now, Austin, a free agent, you may not re-sign him for that reason, and Wilson may, find himself on the outside looking in, just given the new additions that are likely to be added. So we'll see, but I think it was good for JP just to focus that on the history as opposed to trying to apply that to current roster construction. Just keep things apples to apples.
And obviously, as we get further into this offseason, Alex will have his what the Steelers look for, and then we'll see
I'm
how
not sure if I
much.
will because how
Yeah,
reliable will it be? I mean, I could do
I
it,
think
but
you
is it going
still
to be as
do it,
telling?
but I think we use it as an asterisk that Mike McCarthy,
Yeah.
uh, I would still do it. I don't know how much we'll lean on as far as accuracy because obviously this is year one of a draft with Mike McCarthy. So I think you still do it with the asterisk of, will it mean anything?
Yeah, I guess we could do it just to see how much in line it is or how different it is. And if it is a lot different, then we can have data that really kind of pinpoints that. So yeah, I might. It just takes some time. But obviously the predictive power will be a lot less than it has been in the past.
All right, Brett Nile has a question about your mock draft you just recently released that we went over on the last show. He says, "Hey, David Ox, so I was looking at Alex's mock draft and I didn't hate it. All right, you got
Hey, I'll take it. That's an I love it in mock
that's a
draft world.
that's a win.
Yeah.
Uh, and the fact it ended up being the Steelers draft, I'd be most. He says, and the fact if that ended up being the Steelers draft, I'd be mostly happy. However, I did have a couple of follow. So we got I didn't hate it, and I'd be mostly happy. He
But
says he says I love the pick of Terrell in the first, but if he's not available, who else did you consider? Who would have been your second choice? I know how tough that is. I hate doing mock drafts at this stage of my career, and then the first ones in February, you still don't know. You don't have your arms
mhm,
around a class that you would say in mid-April, right?
sure.
And usually that's when we each put uh uh considered, others considered in there. So I guess the short answer is, did you have any who would have been your second choice?
I don't know if there was a clear silver medal to stay with the Olympics framing and analogies in my head. It probably would have been a receiver. I just wasn't sure which one. Cardinal Tate's probably gone at that point. Maybe too early on Omar Cooper Jr. Would it have been KC Concepcion? Would it have been Lemon? Would it have been Denzel Boston? I'm a little lower on Boston than I am others. Probably one of the receivers, but I don't know which one it would have been.
All right, number 2, at this point, I love Cooper the player, but if I guarantee you that he would play the same number of snaps in 2026 as Roman Wilson did in 2025 with Rodgers at quarterback, would you still take him in the second round? Well, it's hard for you to sit here and guarantee me that he would only play how many snaps did Roman play? 200 something?
Yeah, but I mean, to entertain the hypothetical, if you had that supposition, would you change your mind on it? I think that's a fair question.
Look, I'm not making any decisions based on Aaron Rodgers playing one more season in Pittsburgh. If this is a guy that I think that can help me long term and potentially be a key contributor over the course of the next 4 years, I'm drafting that player. I guess it is a fair look. I mean, it and a lot of Aaron, but Aaron did. You go back to Romeo Dub's rookie season. Didn't Aaron kind of get in line with Romeo right from the get go?
Um, yeah, let me look at his rookie numbers that year. Yeah, Dubs had decent numbers, 42 for 425 and 3 in 13 games. So that was some good production as a fourth round pick too, especially. Each guy's different. I mean, to answer the question, no, it would not change my opinion or my mind or decision to take Omar Cooper. As you said, it's a longer term thing. The short term player Rogers is not gonna prevent that anyway. And you're gonna probably add another veteran, so it's not like Cooper was gonna start out of the gate for you day one. So and plus Cooper's a good route runner. He's smart and I think can work in well with what Rogers likes and is looking for. So it's not that he hates rookies at a principle. It's just they generally need an adjustment, maybe coming from the college system where they haven't dealt with press and dealing with the playbook and stuff like that. I think Cooper's pretty smart. The relationship with Adam Henry would help. So no, all that to say is it would not change my mind one bit.
And then throwing Cooper out of the equation, if you drafted one of those, quote unquote, slam dunk supposed first rounder guys, you're not going to draft that guy and not get him on the field, regardless of who your quarterback is.
I mean, I get he's going to play, obviously. I get the concern, how well will that fit work, but what is your alternative? Not draft a receiver? I mean, it's just you need a
Right.
receiver. There's gonna be more utility than just this year. The guy still could provide something for you. The numbers may not be big, but if he gets a Dubs line of 42 for 425 and 3, you might sign up for that if you have another veteran receiver along with DK Metcalf that will provide production along with Pat Freiermuth. So no, you gotta look at these things through beyond the scope of just the right now.
All right, his third point here. The third round pick of Garrett Nussmeier was an interesting one, but I will submit that this team is going to trade some of these picks for picks next year, and this might be the ideal spot. So if a team were to offer you a second round pick in 2027 for this pick for them to draft Nussmeier, would you do it? I mean, that you want to talk about huge hypotheticals there. We're talking about the third or maybe fourth quarterback off the board, round 3 or so, and he's
I mean, yes, to answer the question, yes, I
yeah,
would. I don't have
yeah.
that much affinity for Nussmeier. I think it would make sense, but will they trade picks? Yes, it's impossible to predict. Would you want picks for 27? Yes, but who's coming up? Is there somebody really that's pining that much for Nussmeier that passed on him, presumably in the second round, that now wants to trade a future second round pick to go get him? It's always possible, but seems unlikely to kind of square that circle. So trades will happen. They're just so hard to predict. No one really knows until you're in that moment. You see the board, you see what teams' offers are, you see what your situation looks like, the landscape is. And so it's just always tricky to do those kinds of trades. But yeah, if you can get some high end 27 capital and still make good picks this year and have enough picks this year, sure, you can do that.
I'll talk in almost absolutes here. Almost.
Okay. Okay.
The Steelers will make a day 2 trade in the draft.
Up or down?
Up.
Up. Well, I guess down would be in the sense of trading for 27 capital. That'd be the reason to trade down. But yeah, up would make a lot of sense.
All right. Let's see. Deshaun Campbell in here. Sup, guys? I wanted to ask you guys what memorable things that Mike Tomlin did that his new staff might not do that you will miss the most. Do you think tradition of GM and head coach pro day will likely indicate their first round selection? He says, for me, I truly, truly hope back on backers continue. I feel like that was Tomlin's staple in training camp. I would hate for that to go away. Also, on the Wednesday podcast, you guys were asked about the most shocking move the Steelers did the past 5 years. And he says, in my opinion, the Steelers Depot most legendary podcast was the live reaction of the Kenny Pickett trade, because it completely caught you guys off guard and shifted the whole podcast. Yeah, that's a great point, Deshaun. I don't know if that would be a legendary podcast, probably for good or bad, but it was quite a reaction show, that's for sure. So I get that. What things Tomlin did will you mostly miss? Well, I already missed the Mike Tomlin at the Senior Bowl uh, experience. I still think we'll see GM head coach at Pro Day. I'm expecting that, but will it indicate their first round selection?
I'm trying to think. They have not been at the pro day of their first round pick the last 2 years in terms of GM or head coach in Harmon and Fautanu, in part because Pittsburgh doesn't know you can travel west of the Mississippi, and so they never send the GM and coach out there. Rare exception. Colbert was at
Gas price has been pretty
Stanford.
good lately. Maybe they.
Maybe they should go. So what's been more relevant lately, even in the Tomlin era, was the pre-draft visits. Everyone calls them top 30. There's no bottom 30, just the 30 pre-draft visits, but whatever. So those have been more predictive than anything else recently. But yeah, that could certainly change. One other move. I guess you call it surprising. I just think back to all the moves that were made, especially recently. Remember when Pittsburgh signed Cam Sutton, like 2 months after he was on the run from police for the domestic dispute with his girlfriend gets cut, and Pittsburgh's like, "Yeah, we'll take him back." What a bizarre decision and saga that all, and obviously his play was terrible too. So
Right.
what a weird situation. That one surprised me when Pittsburgh just went like both feet in. Yeah, Cam Sutton, good to go. Welcome back. Forget
Yeah.
everything you just did. They got you cut.
Good point. Good point. Uh, let's see. Backs on backers. Yeah, I'd like to hopefully see that continue, especially during Friday night lights and all. What about 7 shots?
Yeah, I mean, the whole training camp structure could change, and just big picture, will it be as physical? Because most teams do thud tackling where they just wrap, you don't go to the ground. Tomlin was one of the rare exceptions to that, and it made camps fun and a lot more interesting for us to talk about. So if that goes away, I think it's one big picture thing. And I always appreciated a Tomlin Tuesday. That kind of worked well with our schedule. Would do the podcast Monday, talk about the game, then Wednesday, talk about the Tomlin presser Tuesday. I don't know how McCarthy's going to operate. Will he talk one day? What day will that be? Will he talk multiple days? A lot of coaches now talk 3, 4 times a week. Tomlin was basically just on Tuesday. So you and I are people of structure and don't like change, and so we have to probably adjust our schedules to all of that too.
All right, James Cicinelli writes in salary cap Yoda and Alex. He says, so obviously trading a wide receiver is different than getting a free agent wide receiver, but the free agent wide receiver class is not great. He says Jennings, Pierce, Shaheed, and there will be many teams after them. Casey for starters. Washington, the Raiders, after those types of guys. What if the Steelers trade for Waddle, for example? Let's say they give up a first round pick, which I know hurts, but there might be uh he says salary cap financial savings. Waddle signed a 3-year, $84.75 million contract with an $18 million signing bonus. So now to us, it's 3-year, $66 million contract, if I'm not mistaken. Do you think you could get Pierce for 3 years, $66 million? Seems to think so. Sport Track seems to think so because they have him valued at $20 million a year, but I doubt it, he says. But you would have to compete with other NFL teams for him to agree to come to a team without a high caliber quarterback. Just a thought, it might cost you draft picks to do the trade, but maybe you save money in the end. I know that didn't happen with DK, but he was near the end of his contract and needed a new contract, not to start off his contract like Waddle. So I guess we go to the bulk of this. Would you give up a first round draft pick for Waddle?
No, I don't think so. I
I
hadn't
don't
thought about it much.
I
Probably
don't
not.
I don't first blush I would not either. Let's see here, looking at Waddle's contract. The interesting thing about Waddle's contract, it looks like, is he's another one that's got one of those option has option bonuses in his contract, and they have to make a decision on his option on what to do with it on March 20th, so right after the start of the new league year. And thus, if they did not exercise that option, then his cap hit becomes much higher for 2026 than it's listed at over the cap right now. So I would imagine, and then Miami's not going to more than likely not going to exercise that option and prorate that option bonus out. and then turn around and trade him after March 20th. So if you even want to get into the conversation, I think about Waddle, I think March 20th is the date is the date to see if anything happens by then.
Yeah, we'll see. I know that they're moving and purging the roster, but those are more the older veterans and some of the injured guys like James Daniels. So probably would want to keep something there to build towards. I imagine Waddle's in those plans.
Who do they
M-
even have at wide receiver now that Hill's gone? Who do they
Malik Washington is the name that comes to mind.
okay, and uh who else at wide receiver?
Not much, I don't think. I can try to look. They'll
Yeah.
probably be in these waters like Pittsburgh for receiver help, I imagine, for whoever the new quarterback is going to be.
All right, my gut tells me that Jalen Waddle won't be traded, especially on the heels of the whole Tyreek Hill thing, right?
Yeah, that's my read. They're going to keep and build with him, is my expectation. But I know there were some trade rumors last year. You know, obviously, the old GM, new regime in there. So you never know, but would not give up a first, I don't think, for Waddle.
All right, let's take one more from Craig Sampson. Says, guys, the usually boring Steelers have been in the news all year. Do you think they are in? Do you think there are any true? Did we hit this the other day? No.
I don't think so.
Do you think there are any true blue chip prospects in this class? If not, we should trade down for. Yeah, I think we hit.
Maybe we did. Yeah, I didn't
I
hear
think
the
we
rest of
did
it.
hit
Yeah,
hit
we
hit
may have
hit
hit
this
that.
the other day. Yeah, because he asked about Broderick Jones' career threatening. So we
Oh,
did
okay,
hit
we did.
this
We did.
and all. All right, I think we got through a large selection of listener emails here. That puts us about an hour and a half show. We got to get to writing up some things and see what Mike McCarthy had to say during his interview. Anything else come out of that as we close this out that you know of?
Just from our group chat, I didn't see anything else. I've not gotten to read through it myself, so I don't think it was anything big. I think it was just some old Packers radio shock jocks, maybe just yucking it up there. So
All
probably
right.
nothing crazy.
All right, Alex and I will get back after it on Monday. In the meantime, if you want to follow me on Twitter/X at Steelers Depot, follow Alex at Alex_Kozora, follow the show at Terrible Podcast, email the show, theterriblepodcast@gmail.com. If you're on YouTube and listening to this, what did the kids say? Like it and subscribe and all like that.
Smash that like button.
Smash that like button. And let's see, if you want to donate to the cause, SteelersDepot.com, hit the donate button. Also, if you like an ad-free version of the site, SteelersDepot.com, hit the ad-free button, follow the directions that way, get a username and log in, and hit the login button to take advantage of the ad-free version of the site. All right, had some fun today, Alex. We'll get back after it on Monday. And as always, thanks for listening to the Terrible Podcast with Dave and Alex.